We are here while you're working on videos for your new record, Cognitive Dissonance. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, I was first made aware of you when you released an EP called Anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to say things that sound condescending, but you guys have really grown since that record. How would you describe your evolution from Anthropology to here?
Let you take it.
Okay. A couple of different things happened. We had a change in personnel with our band that really shifted a lot of our dynamics. I mean, Keith and I have been working together. The band itself has actually been around for 20 years, off and on. But Keith and I have been working together, just jamming and collaborating in some sense, probably since the mid-90s. So we've had chance to develop really good chemistry, but bringing in a new drummer really kind of, I think, helped us solidify our sound and start looking at like what is the voice of the band is probably the underlying piece. And then I think the other bit of it is kind of looking for something of an identity, and some of it is marketing oriented, of like, all right, we're an instrumental band that doesn't really conform to one particular genre, but like what is our kind of core essence as musicians, and that kind of came through just thinking about Keith and my background, him growing up being a jazzer, playing a horn or a saxophone, and then but also really kind of going in also like hard rock and metal and stuff. And I am the flip of that, where I grew up listening to hard rock, heavy metal. That's how I got started playing guitar, and then I went to college for jazz. So jazz guitar, and that's kind of like, all right, so those two sort of genres are kind of sort of I guess like a core sense of identity for us. And then you kind of had the Master of Puppets thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, he's exactly right.
Yeah.
I started off coming from a jazz background, and even in jazz, I found myself gravitating to harder edge type jazz, right? And so then when I started to listen to rock, same thing. I went to the harder edge type stuff. So to me, I didn't see that much of a difference between like the intensity of like live Coltrane versus the intensity of Metallica or Slayer or whatever. Like to me, there's huge similarities there. And yeah, I would play. What I loved about metal, even when I was playing sax, was that it was in different keys, not the typical keys that you play when you're playing jazz, like
right.
B flat, F, E flat, all that kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden, I'm playing an E and A, which on tenor sax is like F sharp and B natural, and they're just different. It's just different. It challenged me in a different way. But eventually, I started to dig into guitar and bass guitar, and we met after near the end of college for you, right?
Yeah.
And I was I was out, and and we were just in a perfect place to start mixing our music.
A lot of common influences. But just kind of going back to the change is really kind of coming up with this sort of identity and kind of using that as a compositional tool to guide the writing process. For a while, we were kind of just doing, hey, let's just be, I guess, progressive rock, which has great things and it has just kind of other connotations to it. But it didn't fit. It didn't really feel right. I mean, in the sense of what the popular idiom or kind of the more common connotation of what progressive rock is, kind of almost seems almost like regressive in a sense. It's like, all right, well, it doesn't sound like bands from like the early 70s and it's not progressive rock, and it just seems like an oxymoron. It's like, well, you want to progress something. But I think the thing that kind of going back to sort of our roots and kind of figuring out our commonalities, Keith and I, as kind of principal writers, the one thing we definitely bonded over was like jazz fusion.
Right.
So that's like, all right, so all the stuff from like Miles Davis's Electric Period, all the bands that came out, like Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, Weather Report, and any of the other kind of lesser known, or the giants who've kind of like gone into that genre to experiment from that time period. I think kind of like the concept of fusing things together of different genres and just not having this sort of elitist or this sort of purist approach about, oh, that's not jazz, or that's not metal, or that's not rock, or it's like, oh, hey, we can experiment with distortion or effects over a jazz form, over a 12-bar blues or a 16-bar form, or we can introduce ideas of chordal harmony or serialism from other aspects of Western music into that and kind of look at it from a more studied nature. But kind of keeping it to where it's this sort of primal thing. And that's really kind of, I think, kind of created a genesis of an identity for us. Bringing Mike in, our drummer, really just kind of helped solidify that. We were able to kind of bring all these kind of abstract ideas in, or some people might say avant-garde, but Mike kind of keeps us really grounded because there has to be a primalness and immediacy. So there's flair and there's finesse, but it's not pretentious at all. There has to be the big thing, I think, is really the emotional content of whatever we're doing. Coltrane had a quote about the emotional effect of the last note that you played is everything. And that's kind of driving that idea of like, all right, whatever we're playing, it's got to have something that resonates within somebody. We don't care what the emotion is, but they have to feel or react to something. Otherwise, it's just background music.
Yeah, it's just background or computer music.
Right.
And I think that yeah, that's one of the things that's happened with us lately is adding more emotional content that just a normal person can try to, even though it's instrumental, weird music that a normal person could get some enjoyment out of.
Yeah.